This is the CW Spiral, a podcast run by three survivors of the CW's calling in 2022. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gowdens,
bringing you history about the network and the WB, the latest news and in-depth Sporterville discussions of the best and messiest shows to ever grace the small screen. Hi, y'all. So we are going to do something a little different for this episode. It's actually going to be more like a breakout because we're going to do the Superman and Lois seasons as they are so far ranked. It is obviously not a definitive ranking. It is subjective in the sense that it's our opinion, but objective in terms of us talking about the way that the storytelling works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
excited to dive in.
yes, so sorry to those who love season 2, but we're going to start with the worst. And for us, that is season 2 of Superman and Lois. This is the introduction of Bizarro. It's also the cult storyline, which is no good. And we learned about the Bizarro world, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like there's like really strong points in the season, and then there's like a weighted storyline that really could have been better.
Yeah, I always have conflicting feelings when looking back on season 2 because everyone thought that season 1 started so strong and then 2 came along and there were some issues out of the gate. I do think it got better as it went on. Um, the internet might try to gaslight me into believing season 2 is bad. It wasn't. It was just my least favorite of the three. Um, there was so much to love about season 2, particularly the Bizarro twist, because I remember at the start when the other Clark broke out of the tunnels, everyone thought it was Doomsday, but I don't know, it actually turned out that it was Bizarro. It was just larger than life with the like taking us into the Bizarro world. Then you got to see more about his family. That did also pave the way for that incredible episode towards the end of the season, Bizarros in a Bizarro World, where our Superman ended up stuck in the Bizarro world. And you got to see Bizarro's life and how that all played out as well. Um, yeah, there's a lot of love in season 2. Um, I will say you mentioned the cult storyline. I know I think that was there were weaknesses there. It was wonderful to see Jenna Dewan back as Lucy Lane. I think that definitely, as an Arrowverse fan, it was nice to see a little callback to Supergirl there by having her back. Um, and the chemistry between her and Bitsy Tulloch as Lois and Lucy was just great. You've definitely got the sister vibe there, and learning more about the Lanes was great as well. Um, I will say, if I remember doing our reviews correctly, I do think my biggest gripe with season 2 was the Sarah and Jordan relationship.
Yes.
Um, I'm not saying that as a, yeah, comic books, I don't like teen drama. I love teen drama. I started watching the CW for the teen drama. I don't think Superman and Lois is of such a high quality and it handles things to such a high quality. I actually think that was its weak point and it didn't handle that drama very, very well because it just got to the stage where the vast majority of viewers were rolling their eyes at their drama. Um, certain characters made certain decisions in that. The story wanted us to be on those character sides when you were actually on the other character side, even though you weren't a fan of that character to begin with. Very conflicting feelings about that storyline. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes, I would.
You
I
like
feel
the
like
word, yes.
every season, I feel like there's always an issue with Sarah and Jordan.
Hmm.
And for whatever, like if it's the opening of season 2, when you're like, no, I thought y'all were good. We went to summer camp and something fell apart. What happened? And there's like, I love that she found out more about herself.
Hmm.
That there's a part of her identity that she knows now. I wish they had talked more about the cheating instead of brushing it under the rug, because two things can be possible at the same time. She can realize that she's bi, and at the same time, that have the way she handled speaking to Jordan about what happened at camp was bad. It was all the way across the board bad. There was just nothing about it that put his feelings into context. She ran.
Hmm.
And I think if I remember correctly, he then got gaslit into not to fully accepting what happened because she realized a piece of herself. And I was like, that's great, boo. But that doesn't change the fact that he got hurt. Like
Yeah.
that's just because it is hurtful. And it wasn't even just that the hurtfulness was the inability to have a conversation with him about it.
Yeah. I think the show suffered for that reason. Towards the end, we finally got her to give an apology in the season finale, but that would they literally had one scene together. And I thought that was really frustrating for me because I wasn't enjoying their scenes the whole season through. And then when she found out that he was actually Superman's son, I was like, nah, I can't wait for their scene. But we jumped 3 weeks and later or something like that. And then she was just like, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. And it was quickly brushed under the rug. It's great that we finally got the apology, but you're right. The vast majority of the season, it made it seem like he wasn't accepting of her. And I'm like, no, no, he absolutely was. And he actually admitted that at one point in the season. I think actually rather early on, he was hurt because she cheated on him, and I don't understand why that wasn't acknowledged by more people. It's great that Sarah had a life-changing moment and that she explored who she was and found more about herself, but I do feel like there could have been a conversation there about how she was unfaithful to her partner at one point in time, and I that just did not come up.
No, and I feel like they didn't want to explore that part because they wanted to be in the happiness of her being able to be like, I realize I like both girls and boys.
Hmm.
And I was like, we can live in that realm for her and still also negotiate the fact that it's not that she's bi that's frustrating him. It's that he didn't get to have a conversation with her about their relationship and how it made
Hmm.
him feel to be put on the back burner like that, having been so excited, for her to be coming back and then school to start, we're gonna have a relationship, and it's like, not really. Which again, fine, but not communication. People probably like listening or watching and be like, but they're teenagers. Like, yes, the miscommunication or the lack of communication because they're teenagers in some ways makes sense. The storytelling around it, however, does not.
Hmm.
Like that part just doesn't, because it's adults writing the story. So like having been young and knowing what it's like to have feelings for someone, regardless of what their gender is, everyone I think would understand his feelings about being not kept out of the loop of her life to the point where he feels like he's not a priority.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I do feel like that the show has struggled past season one. I was really a fan of the Jordan and Sarah relationship in season one, and I do feel like the show has struggled to get them on some kind of an even playing field sense. And because it's one week, it's like whiplash with them. One week you're rooting for one character, and the next week you're rooting for the other character, and the story's telling you should be rooting for one when you're actually rooting for the other. And it's very hard to keep up. But this show has so much together, and I feel like this is the part where the cracks show a little bit, and it really came clear in season two. Some of the other teen drama in season two, there were highs and lows with like Jonathan using the XK, um, and Natalie coming on board. That was a fun. She was a fun addition to the show. After them talking about her so much in season one, and you thinking that she was dead, seeing her come on, having her dynamic with John Henry Irons was great. She became such a like rock for Jonathan, who often feels lost in the storyline, I will say, and
Mhm.
that did come across in season two. Although we did get to see John L, which was the Bizarro version of him, and Jordan Elsass was wonderful in that role. Um, yeah, there was a lot going on in season two. And even looking at back at it now, I do have conflicting feelings because there was so much of it that I did enjoy. I did mention the Bizarro episode, which was toward the end of the season. We had it wasn't fussed on them actually killing Bizarro off that early for Lieutenant Anderson, who I wasn't that much of a fan of as a character. Didn't think he was that great. Um, but I mean, it did ultimately pave the way for that big twist in season three, which we'll get to shortly. Um, but I feel like season two started with a lot of momentum, lost it a bit along the way, and then as we got towards the end of the season, it really regained that. One of my favorite episodes of the whole show was the season two finale when Ali Alston tried to pull their world into the Bizarro world and merge the two worlds together, and Clark supercharged himself in the sun. My God, that scene! I was not fussed on the Superman lost his powers. Every superhero show has that episode at one point. Heck, if you're the Flash, you do it 3 or 4 times throughout your whole run. Um, Superman had always handled it pretty well, but that scene where he regained his powers and he thought of his family, and then he came out of that sun supercharged and defeated Ali Alston in about 2 minutes by overpowering. One of my favorite scenes of the whole show. The show definitely knows how to hit the ground running and hit you over the head with amazing moments when it wants to, and there were plenty of them in season two, even if the storyline did meander a little bit.
Yeah, it's very emotional. I think
Hmm.
sometimes like the meandering is because we're waiting to get to these big emotional explorations, and they don't always land. I will
Yeah.
say that sometimes the build up is kind of better than what the payoff is, but that moment in the sun is really great. That's also is it in the season finale or penultimate episode when John Henry and Natalie are in space? and they're
Yeah, season
having
finale. Yeah.
that amazing conversation. It's literally just them in suits, but like somehow they're making it work because I think that this show does a really good job of grounding the relationships and the dynamics between the parents and their children. And there's just so much of a well of love, even when there's like misunderstanding or even anger, regarding decisions that were made or choices that didn't like quite involve them. I just really love being able to see the breadth of what it means to be a parent, particularly in a superhero drama. So like the breadth of relationships when it comes to friendships. My favorite scene, hands down, of season 2 is Clark telling Lana
Oh
that
my
he's
goodness.
Superman. It's beautifully shot. It speaks to the romance they once had. And I love that they allowed them to live in the realm of we are deeply, deeply, we deeply, deeply care for each other. We love one another. We're not in love anymore. But like there's a part of me that will always love you. And like that, I was like, oh, that's so mature. It's so mature to be like, we don't have to have an affair to
Yeah.
establish that like they care deeply for each other and that it's important that he finally told her. And I liked that Lana got to live in her anger. I didn't like that she got to live in her anger only towards Lois and skirted
Mm.
right past Clark because she didn't want to deal with the fact that she was mad that one of her best friends didn't tell her something deeply intimate about himself. But again, gorgeous scene. Like with the flashbacks too, I was just, whew, they did that. They really did.
That was an insane episode. I almost forgot about that. I remember watching that scene late at night, and getting absolute goosebumps when Clark rose up and he froze the tree with his breath and it just glistened there in the sunlight. The scene was beautifully shot. The music, goosebump inducing, and just the performances, just out of this world, no pun intended. And I remember you, me, and Reed just were messaging each other like, "Oh, it finally happened," because we were hoping that the show would explore that. Um, and no, again, no pun intended, the merging of those worlds, the season we're talking about, and the merging of those worlds. Lana's very realistic as a character. Superman is obviously very super as a character. Those are two different types of storylines. They brought them together beautifully. And the fall, I think how we had to wait 3 weeks for the next episode because that was during that 10 week break where there was only like two episodes there in the space of 10 weeks. Um, and I just remember thinking, my goodness, what a scene. Why would they leave us on a cliffhanger like that? And then, like you said, the following episode, they fastened in their history. We'd only known these versions of these characters for 2 seasons, and yet we were getting their history. We completely bought into it, and you don't have to be a comic book fan to understand the history between Clark Kent and Lana Lang. The show did a wonderful job of highlighting that. I agree. Was not a fan of the fact that she took it out on Lois. Um, it took us a while before we found our footing after it. But those 2 episodes, those scenes, especially since that took place in an episode where Lana was kidnapped by John L. and she was like, "What is going on? Why is there a doppelganger of Clark Kent's son with superpowers?" Um, it was just what a payoff. They made us wait for that. Like that could have been a finale, and I would have been satisfied with it. Um, season 2 had some absolutely phenomenal moments, and you're right. I think that might be at the top of my list as well. Oh, well, what a banger!
I just never, I've watched so much television, and I just feel like that's probably to me the most perfect example you could have of two adults suddenly getting transported back to their teens
Yeah.
to heal a moment between the two of them so they can continue to move forward because there was so much that they couldn't talk about because she didn't know. And so the fact that she does like y'all are like 18 again in the middle of the street, finally be like this 18-year-old Clark being able to tell his best friend, the girl he loves, look, this is me. Like I was like, not me getting teary watching this. It's so beautiful. And it's able to ground it again in their friendship. I know everyone was holding tight. Sometimes Lana and Clark, like, I know we're not about to do what I think we're
Yeah.
about to do. It's like they would never do that to us because first of all, the riot that would happen, because Clark would
Hmm.
never. But second of all, because I think we need to be able to have moments with characters who are now friends who once had history without that history, people trying to drag it into the present in a way that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it makes sense for them to we healed this broken thing between us and now we're so so good. Like everything makes sense, everything comes full circle. I'm like we can talk through this and we're good and we're happy and we feel good for each other.
Hmm.
I love that.
Definitely.
I love their friendship. a lot.
Me too. I think it's as I remember we saying early on that I think this is one of our favorite parts of the show, and the three of us talked about it a lot in the early days of season two because they were starting to share more scenes together. Um, you got over that initial meeting the characters phase in season one. You really started to see how well developed and nuanced their friendship was. It's just so well storylined, and it feels so realistic. I will say that's one of my favorite things about Superman and Lois. And we'll get into that more when we talk about season one. Is the grounded nature of the show and how the normal characters feel like real normal people, and the friendship between Clark and Lana feels really real, really grounded,
Hmm.
really authentic. Um, and considering the fact they hadn't spent that long in each other's company in years because Clark lived in Metropolis, it says wonders about the writing of the show that we got to that point that quickly. Um, and obviously the chemistry between Tyler and Emmanuel as well. Um, yeah, yeah, Lana had a lot of moments in season two. It was a tough season for her, definitely. Uh, but between the fact that she found out more about Clark, her past, and then running for mayor as
Yes,
well. Yeah,
amazing.
my goodness. Superman always has this like triumphant, happy music that comes on whenever something good happens. I think it happens when Superman saves the day, and a lot of time, and it happened that moment when they finally called out that Lana was announced as mayor in the election. And I could feel myself getting a little emotional at that because that woman had been through hell that season. Um, and that was the payoff. That was what she deserved, and she had her moment in the spotlight. Um, and yeah, as just as a real person, as a real again, I said it already. That's why I love Superman and Lois. Yes, I can absolutely go crazy at seeing Superman versus Bizarro on the ice 1 minute, but I can also like have like a warm smile at a really well-rounded, authentic character getting the moment that they deserve in their small town that hasn't shown them the respect they deserve over the years. Finally, they get it, and I think that was probably one of the most fulfilling moments of the season, seeing Lana become mayor.
Definitely was. And then talk about payoff. We got it. She went through so much, but
Yeah.
came out on the other side, just really in the place she deserved to be. To circle back to Bizarro, though, you know I love Bizarro. I have no idea why I love Bizarro, but I've loved Bizarro since I was little. Every time there was like a Superman episode and he showed up, I was like, yes. I don't know if it's because he's just so he means so well. He doesn't know much, but like he's just adorable to me. And like but way too powerful. So I did like the twist here where he is really just the opposite of Clark, but not in the way that we're used to. Like they get you to that point. Like how does Bizarro become that way and why? Um I enjoyed that immensely. It's probably my favorite, like the this might be my favorite. Is it my favorite start of the season? As far as the arc, the first few episode arcs, I think it is. Because I think it's just so well done between Clark's like headaches and sound, the reveal when he pops out of the mine and you're
Mhm.
like, who is that? And I remember sitting tight, I was like, please let it be Bizarro. I don't want it to be Doomsday. I want it to be Bizarro. And you get the was it does his facial mask crack first? And you get the
I believe
eye?
so. Yeah, yeah.
Because I remember screaming. I just remember yelling because I knew it was then. Um, and I really, really enjoyed Bizarro as a character and the arc of getting to see like Bizarro World and how they really threw themselves into making it this red wash world where that is punky and
Yeah.
completely different from the one that we're used to. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. I kind of liked that the Kens were famous. Like
Yeah.
and there was just something futuristic about it too. And nihilistic, if that makes sense. It's just something,
Hmm.
there's something empty in the bizarre world, something that flat and shallow that I enjoyed as a counter to, the Smallville we know, which is full of life and brimming with great relationships. And it is not flashy, but it's very wholesome, and Bizarre World is not that at all. I do hate that it fell apart like that for them though. I wanted the relationships to shift for them to be better for the family. It did not happen, but
Hmm.
um, it makes sense because it is also, I guess, they're foils for our Kens and their
Hmm.
relationships. Remind me, Michael, John and Clark in Bizarre World, they don't have a good relationship, right?
That yeah, I believe
Yeah.
that's correct. They were waiting on John's powers to come in, and then they did. So Clark took one under his wing to be a superhero, and I am completely on your side with that. there was something very nihilistic and hopeless about that world. Even though there were heroes, it all just felt very business. It all felt very by the numbers. There was no like sense of hope. Everything was like celebrity driven. You saw that John and the super family so much became celebrities. John was on talk shows. Um, he was a celebrity that had gained a huge social media following, and nothing was done for the right reasons in that world. And there was that incredible montage after John came into his powers. Um, that there was like a punk rock song playing over the top of it, and a montage that showed John being on a talk show. It showed John saving people. It showed John going to parties. It showed John finding a girlfriend. Um, and it was just such a, like you said, contrast to the hopeful golden era, kind of like golden hour lit shots of Smallville we always see in the main world. It made for an incredible contrast, and I loved that episode as a standalone because you really got to see the what's the word? The conflict between John and his father. They didn't have a good relationship. It wasn't there. Lois kind of took a back seat as well. She didn't stand up for her children. She kind of just went with the flow. Um Jordan, complete contrast from our world. While Jordan's been the main focus of the storyline as far as the kids go, in the main world, he had very little to do in the Bizarro world. It made for quite the compelling I hate to keep using the word contrast, but like they literally turned the contrast up on that world. There was so much darkness, so much gloominess, so much dullness. Superman and Lois, towards the end of each of its season, always does an incredible standalone episode. This was it in this season, and it might be the best of them all. I know there's a huge case to be made for the season one. But like it showed the show in a whole new light and a very single one. We're never going to see something like that again. Um, I remember tweeting about that episode and calling it cinema, and I genuinely still stand by that to this day. It's a cinematic experience through and through. You'd never expect to see the like of that on television. Yes, there was family drama. Yes, John and Clark did not get along. Yes, there was a lot of trauma as far as the Bizarro world versus the main world's version of Superman and how their stories differed from each other. But you also got to see how the two versions of Ali Austin were responsible for a lot of that trauma, and it set up the end of the finale really, or set up the finale really, really well. I've said it before, a filler episode or a standalone episode can be incredibly useful when the time is right. And I think this was the perfect example of it. I knew when I wanted to talk about season two, I wanted to spotlight that episode in particular. And I hope that my praise rambling about it really highlighted that because it was something else entirely.
It was. I think so. Though season two is at the bottom for us, it is one of the most ambitious seasons of
Yeah.
television. And I think it's at the bottom because not all of it lands, right? But I'd rather them shoot for the moon and miss it by a hair than play it safe. And it's like it's okay season. Like
Yeah.
there were so many things that they did that did work, and the cult storyline is not one of them for me in particular. I think it's not even just because Lucy tends to be, as much as Jenna Dewan, put her heart into the performance, the way that the character's written, she's one note the entire time. It's
Yeah.
anger through the entire arc until you get towards the end. And since we weren't with her before any of this, it's hard to know who she was before the call. They tell us, but like we don't she just seems like a lost individual, and there's just not enough there for us to care about her being lost when you're seeing her react the way that she does to her family members who love her. Like I wish we knew her better because I think it would help ground some of the arguments that she was having because her life wasn't perfect, or it didn't go the way that she thought it would. Especially because I am obsessed with knowing more about the Lane family drama. Like I really want to know more about what life was like after their mom left and it was just Sam, who is not emotionally unavailable now, but sounds like he was a lot back in the day and very strict. And neither of the two girls responded well to that, particularly Lois.
Hmm.
like, and what it means to be the older sibling who feels like you have to step in to have the mom role, and your younger sibling resenting that.
Hmm. And I do think you got to see in season two that there was quite a bit of unresolved tension between Lois and her father. like that could blow up very easily at any point, but normally it's about something super related. The fact that Lucy came back into their lives and then that Lois had to like open up to her dad about how she felt like he wasn't always around because he threw himself into work and how she had to do the basically the raising of her sister, which is why it's so unfortunate that it ended up in the position that Lucy actively chose Ollie Alston over Lois, turned against Lois, and ultimately nearly threw her career into disrepute by revealing that information that she wasn't truthful about some of her sources. Um, it was very hard to root for Lucy. And you're right, because we didn't know her as a character before that or outside of it, it did often come off as one note. But I definitely think the thing that mostly sold it was Lois's conflict over the whole thing because she was stuck in the middle of it. And I mean, Bitsy was giving it everything in those scenes. She absolutely was. Um, and the big twist then that Lucy turned on her father by knocking him out so that Ollie could get the key for the DOD. I'm like, I kind of saw it coming because I just knew not to trust Lucy at that point. So maybe if we had a little bit more nuance in the story or a bit more screen time with Lucy, that would have been more of a shock. Uh, but yeah, I agree. I struggled with the character, but I am happy that it brought us more of the Lane family dynamic. And I do hope that as we're not talking about season four now, but when season four does come about, that even though Sam's screen time will be limited, we will get more of that. Because one of the best things Superman and Lois does is family drama, and the Lanes have a lot of that.
Yes, they do. I think this is a good way to segue into our next pick, which I feel like if you know where season two lands, if you know which one we're about to say next, season three,
Hmm.
the most controversial season they've yet to do, particularly because of Lois's cancer storyline, which was very hard to watch. And understandably, some people chose not to tune in, or to get information from people they trust to let them know which episodes were going to be the hardest to watch. But Bitsy Tulloch has deserved an Emmy for every season she's done of Superman and Lois, but she really, really deserved one for season three.
Without a doubt, that second episode of the season. I remember we were sent the screeners for the first two episodes, I think. And the first episode was very triumphant, very beautiful, very standalone. And then that second episode came along and it hit you in the face and heart and everywhere, basically. Um, the when Lois found out that something was wrong and she needed more tests, um, the way Bitsy highlighted that with the refusal to talk about it, the little white lies she told here and the little lies she told there to avoid people knowing that there was something up and that she needed to deal with it herself before she found out. And then she did find out early in the episode, and you spent the whole episode waiting on it, what the revelation was going to be. And then she revealed to the judge who was on the rooftop that she actually had been diagnosed with cancer and that Superman had to hear that from the distance. So she had to have that raw, burying her soul moment, knowing that her husband was above, literally levitating above her, listening to that conversation was just incredible. And the way Bitsy played it, I always go back to the real moment that gets me every time. And after the episode ended, I had to sit in darkness just for a few minutes because, wow, was the episode where the Clark and Lois revealed the her diagnosis to the kids. Um, I still struggle to get through that scene. Um, and there was very little dialogue in it, which says a lot about the performances. Um, yeah, yeah, the way Bitsy was able to just get to that level in one episode was just incredible, and it was really moving. The way Clark just silently sat beside her, supporting her with his hand on her shoulder and holding her hand in his other hand as well. And then just watching the four of them break down in that hug together with no dialogue, just music and a lot of slow motion close-ups on everyone's faces. Acting masterclass. Um, when I think of Superman and Lois, that's one of the first scenes I think of because I always said this show handles authentic family storylines incredibly well, and that was one of the hardest scenes anyone would ever have to watch. I never could imagine what that scene would be like, and I know people who have had to go through similar situations like that. So to see it conveyed in such a genuine, authentic, and moving way, words could never describe it. I'm struggling to describe it as we speak. It's just absolutely incredible moment.
It is their opening moments and their closing moments a lot in season three were really emotional.
Yeah,
Um, not me being choked up now as we're talking.
I
Excuse
get
me.
it.
Um, But no, it was. It's very stirring and very moving, and hard. Like I think they one of the things that I appreciate that they did was that they allowed Lois to not be a superwoman about it. You know,
Hmm.
like she was frustrating at times because she wasn't doing the things that she was supposed to be doing. They allowed her to be angry. There was a lot of room for her to feel what she was feeling, but also room given for her family to feel what they're feeling, not to prioritize it because she's the one who is going through this, but to also be like they are too with her. And the moment that gets me is when the grief meeting, the support, and the leader, has to say you need to be able to get to an emotional point where when you can tell that they're staying for you, you can tell them it's okay. And like the
Hmm.
way that Clark was just not ready to hear that. And it's like understandable because who's ever ready to hear that? I there was so much the actress who played the leader of the group was so good too because
Hmm.
she did that dialogue in a way of someone who is settled in the choices she had to make for her husband.
Hmm.
She played it like a woman who has gone through the rough end of grief and is now in the acceptance of it. I think that's so hard to do, um, especially if you've never gone through it. I don't know if she has or not. I just felt like she was really fantastic in being able to present that way with also love. There was so much love in that scene. Actually, there's so much love in the season. I think whether
Hmm.
they were our main players or our recurring characters. Um, Remind me, what is Bruno's wife's name?
Pia.
Pia. Amazing, truly amazing. I think one of the things that I've said before on the podcast when it comes to Superman and Lois is I wish that Lois had more peers to speak to. So the fact that she had Pia and we got to have this storyline where she starts off as being a someone who was in chemo with her. That she gets to talk to, who becomes her friend, to then that friend also, being the wife of her husband's nemesis. Like,
Right.
and yet the way that the show is able to walk the line of humanity is amazing because Lois, even knowing all that, still holds ground for Pia to be a person who has made choices that she might not agree with. But at the end of the day, she is someone that she respects and she is someone that she wanted to see survive. And
Hmm.
then when that wasn't going to happen, that she needs dignity and to be able to leave this world the way that she wants to. And the fact that Clark gave that to Pia too, that he was able to do that. There's just so many messages and love in this season 3 that makes it fantastic because there's room. I think that's one of the reasons why I love Superman because it's all heart
Yeah.
all the time. And that is what Lois was doing, and that's what Clark was doing through that entire arc of the season.
Oh, without a doubt. I agree totally. I feel like this season definitely wore its heart on its sleeve or chest instead of the S logo. There was just so much emotion in it. And I do think that's one of my favorite things about what Superman and Lois does is it humanizes everyone, even the villains. Bruno Mannheim is such a one-dimensional character in the comics. And here, largely due to Chad L. Coleman's performance, but he had good material to work with. You really fast for him. Of course, he came across very one-dimensional in the beginning, but as the season went on, you find out that actually he's doing everything he's doing to try to save his wife. Um, and then the fact that they introduced that was the first ever live action appearance for Onomatopoeia, who is normally a Green Arrow villain. Um, and they added all the like superpower tendencies to them to make them opposition towards Superman. Um, and then you find out that no, this was actually Pia. I will say I said about season two that about twists you see coming. I did not see that twist coming. I thought they handled that really, really well, and I think that's down to just the emotional gravity of how they handled the storyline. Lois being in her treatments and making a friend was such a separate storyline from the Superman versus Bruno Mannheim storyline that I would have been okay if they never crossed over. I was equally as compelled. In fact, no, I was more invested in the Lois storyline because that's how well the show does grounded real storylines. Um, So the fact that they did make the decision to cross them over towards the end was a twist I genuinely didn't see coming. And it didn't cheapen it, in my opinion. Of course, you could be like, oh, look, here comes a villain and their superpowers. But no, you still got to see that underneath uh, that strange mask she wore as onomatopoeia, Pia was still a mother, she was still a wife, and she was still a human with a lot of life left to give. Um, and that was very much who Lois was as well. You mentioned how the characters could still act up like they were frustrated by the world around them and what the situation they found themselves in, which was a really authentic moment. And I totally agree with that. Um, wasn't it episode 3 after Lois's diagnosis that she insisted on continuing to put herself in harm's way because she
Hmm.
was like, even though this is happening to me, I'm still Lois Lane and I still need to be Lois Lane. So even though audience's initial reaction was like, Lois, your appointment, don't miss it again, you also completely by the end of the episode understood why she kept putting it off because that was the moment of acceptance for her, and she didn't want to accept that she would have to. No one wants to put their life on hold for an illness of all things, but she didn't want to have to accept that she would have to pull back. Her life was about to change, and if she could take down her arch enemy before she could do that, she was perfectly fine. But I think the ending of that episode, where she finally agreed to go to her first chemo session, and her whole family, including the Ironses, were there for her. John Henry and Natalie were struggling with that as well because they already lost one Lois in their mother and their wife. So now that to see another Lois go through something life changing and life threatening was too much for them, but they were there to support her in the end. That music when she held Clark's hand as he drove the pickup truck just right out of the farm, and as they passed the little Kent mailbox, and with that soft emotional music as he got the slow mo on Lois, again such an incredible moment. Um, and the next couple of episodes, you're right, the opening and the closing of every scene or every episode had a scene where Lois had to deal with something, where Lois had to talk about something related to her illness, or there was another huge moment. Um, there's a montage. Um, is it the fifth episode or something where you get to see what Lois's treatment looks like, and
Yes.
again, very little dialogue. Clark walks around, sits across from her, and you can see the like grimace on her face as the chemo enters her system. Um, little moments like that had me in tears before the Superman and Lois logo for the episode loader. Um, and the episode probably made me feel like that once or twice before the end credits rolled as well. Um, the show handled the storyline with such grace and authenticity that you're right, it was very hard to watch. And people close to me have gone through treatments like that. And you hear about it and you see the toll it takes on them. And so to see it play out again on television, and like I know it's television and I know this is a superhero show, but the fact that it could still touch you like that. I come from a place where the soaps on TV use their platform to highlight important storylines like that, raise awareness about issues that people go through. And I think Superman and Lois did a great job of that, particularly in the first half of the season. I understand that it's a superhero show, and towards the second half of the season, the super end of it had to take a bit of precedence. And because the season had less episodes than a normal season would have, we meandered a little bit and we got a little stuck. Um, but it did ultimately pull it back towards the end. But those first 5, 6 episodes, where you got to see how Lois felt about it, you got to see that Lois struggled with the fact that she was a wife, she was a mother, and that she didn't want to lose the life that she'd built. But at the same time, by accepting that she had to fight this beast, she did have to lose a part of the fact that she was Lois Lane and couldn't do all the investigating that she wanted to do. It was such a powerful conflict. I think if you watch our reviews from season 3, I use the word powerful an awful lot, and it feels redundant at this point because it could not sum it up. But I hope that does sum up just how moving I think the storyline was. You didn't want to see your characters go through it, but you couldn't help but be moved by the fact every time they did. There were such powerful scenes between Lois, Clark, and the boys. Like you mentioned the scene with Clark with the support group. That was just what an important element of one of those storylines is that, or a storyline like that when someone's battling an illness, is that the people around them can sometimes often get lost in their own feelings, and that they feel a certain element of guilt for feeling sorry, not sorry for themselves, but feeling that they're stuck in the moment as well and forgetting to look after themselves. And I think that support group scene in that episode really highlighted that Clark's Superman, and he still has very human and normal feelings. And that's okay. It's okay not to be okay when you're going through a situation like that. It's okay to be conflicted over how your partner's feeling or what your partner's doing if they're going through a situation like that. But at the same time, it's also important to listen to them and understand what they need. And Clark and Lois are the ultimate couple goals. And I feel like this season, as traumatic as it was for them, really highlighted their strength as a couple because they found common ground and they worked through this. Their greatest threat, Doomsday, Lex Luthor, nothing could compare to a threat like that. And the two of them navigated their way through it together and as a family. And I feel like that's one of the most important things you can take away from a show like Superman and Lois.
It is. They're really good at the marriage of it
Hmm.
all. I think one of the things that I adore about season three is the focus on Clark and Lois's relationship.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, they do that every season, but there's something particular about this season. I think it is about because we start in such a place of joy. They are happy. They're taking advantage of Talrow's what seaside apartment that he's got going. She thinks that she might be pregnant. Like, and they might be introducing another little Kent to the world, only for that to flip. And then one of the reasons why I didn't agree with the critique that I've seen before about the season being, Lois got cancer to inform Clark's storyline. I don't agree because it's clear throughout the season that it's Lois's storyline. Now, I understand not wanting to see her in a storyline like this. That's totally valid. Like, absolutely, I understand that. But I also wouldn't go as far to say that it's about Clark. And I know some of that critique happened earlier on the season before we got the 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 episodes that we did get. But it's just not what happened on the show because there's so much focus on Lois and how she's feeling and how her family's feeling. She's the center of this plot. And then we also get to see again those heartbreaking openings for the episodes, the loss she feels and the loss that Clark feels in their marriage because of the illness. That I don't remember what episode it is, but it's when we get that montage in the beginning of her slowly having to leave the room that they share.
Yeah.
And the because she does not feel good. The montage of it includes her being sick from the treatments too. It's just so much. And I was like, I love that we're going here. I love that we're depicting this because I think sometimes when we do storylines involving cancer, a lot of the times you see people going in and out of hospitals, but you don't see their home life.
Yes.
And in Superman and Lois, they were like, no, this affects everything. So we're going to show you how it's affecting the home. Um, I don't remember if the title of the episode is The Dress, but The Dress. That episode where you get to like really like I was like, why is he? I get why he's holding on to this dress, but I know she doesn't want to, and I'm not understanding. And then you get the flashback. It's the first thing, the first dress he bought her, and I was like, oh girl, Lois, can we unpack the conversation? Because I get where he's coming from, and I get where you're coming from, but the dress is important. Can we just put it in a bag? Maybe give it to Natalie for safekeeping. I don't know, or one of the boys for safekeeping. But I love the emotional exploration of what that dress means for both of them. And how it's disparate. Like she sees the dress and she's sad about what she lost. He sees the dress and he loves what he remembers about their relationship at that time. And that how it's very hard. And then he respected it too. Didn't he give the dress up?
Um, I
He
can't
did.
remember how it ended. Didn't she wear it in the end? Did
She did, but
she did?
initially he grabs, doesn't he take it
Oh
into
yes, he was
the
going to agree with her. Yes, I think
yeah.
he was conflicted over it, but that's who Clark is, and I think that's why it was important. Like the support group episode we mentioned, he was conflicted over a lot of what happened, but at the same time, he was very understanding about what she needed. Um, and I mentioned season two, and it's or how the show always does standalone episodes. We mentioned the season two one. This was the standalone flashback episode for season three, and it absolutely wasn't standalone. In fact, of the three of them, it's probably the one that fits into the storyline the best. Um, wow. Uh, the flashbacks to Lois going to the award ceremony in the dress, you just see the like love in their eyes as a new couple at the time, and how you can flash forward to 20 years later and that love is older, that love has grown, that love is more it's wrinkled, it's withered by time, and yet it's still super strong. It looks the same but different, like any real love would. Um, and you can still sense that the beautiful strength of the relationship through and through. Um, the ending of that episode where she came out. in her beanie, in her little jacket, but the dress, and still looked every bit as beautiful. And Clark in his suit without his glasses because he wasn't Clark Kent, he wasn't Superman, he was just himself in that moment. And the two of them sat there together, looking into each other's eyes like they did 20 years ago. And when they levitated into the sky,
Hurt.
my heart, yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Um, yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, there is the beautiful marriage of superpowers versus authentic storytelling and how they can go hand in hand in a season like this. And again, very little dialogue, and that scene spoke volumes. Uh, yeah, I don't even know if I can talk about it without getting emotional. I almost forgot about that scene because every time I think of it, I get teary. Um, Incredible moment. There's no words to describe a moment like that on TV. And as always, Tyler and Bitsy were stunning.
And no, this is probably weirdly the best close episode, and they're all pretty good. But like this is, I mean, not close episode, close season, and they're
Hmm.
all pretty good. But like it's just something that I they just there's so much attention to their marriage and their relationship, and the well of love and the friendship there. And then I liked that, and again, do it more writers when Lois gets to speak to a peer. This is also the season where Lana and her have that sit down conversation. And it's just, I remember yelling about it in our podcast episode for the episode because I really, really enjoy that they got to speak openly about womanhood, and the way that Lois's understanding of her body is changing.
Hmm.
And that's not a conversation she can have with Clark. So the fact that they got a scene with her and Lana talking about it, I was like, absolutely yes. Because it very much felt like it felt real. It felt like two adult women having a conversation that's also kind of funny, about, what it means to exist in the space as a woman, to exist in your body as a woman and how you define it. And how that's also in the dress, is it not? Is that
I think it might be.
so?
I think that might be the same episode, yeah.
Okay, well, again, stellar episode
Mm.
from the writers, but no, to really just be able to have an open and honest conversation like that, and of all places, a superhero drama, is
Right.
just amazing. They also had conversations about mastectomy, which again, not a thing that you would or cancer. I don't think. Well, no, there are superhero shows that talk about cancer, but not in the way that they were talking about it in Superman and Lois. It was just amazing that this is a storyline that they decided to do, that they got away with doing on the CW of all networks. Not that CW hasn't had serious storylines, but this is also the network, or used to be the network, of Riverdale, The Vampire Diaries, and Gossip Girls, which all three have had serious storylines, but not ones that ran all the way through a season in this capacity. I don't think any of the other superhero dramas tackled anything like this all the way through either.
Mm.
And it's really heartening that they decided to do this and do it well. And moving to other things though, because I feel like what makes season three so great is the way that they handled this storyline, but there are also other great moments. I enjoyed Lana and Sarah's relationship growing in this
Hmm.
season. There is just having the two of them having had so much combativeness, and for then Sarah to start to see her mom as a person and not just as her mom who she feels is like getting in her way for the things she wants to
Hmm.
do was great. My favorite scene for them is the fireworks scene.
Incredible moment.
It's where she got to finally see her mom, you know, as a person, like she too was a teenager who had dreams, who had this choices that she wanted to make for herself that she didn't always get to make. Like she gets it, she understands, she's just also your mom.
Hmm. And it really went a long way in highlighting that they're people. I don't want to sound like I'm constantly complaining about Sarah, but I feel like in the way that she had been portrayed a lot recently is that she reacts to a lot of things and she does a lot of things, but she doesn't stop to see who she's doing them to sometimes. Um, and we've already talked about the Jordan, but and there was again a lot of issues with the Sarah and Jordan relationship in season three. I don't think they had enough time to fully dive into it, so you were getting whiplash back and forth every single week. but she finally stopped and took stock of who Lana was as a person outside of just being her mom. And she was like, you know what, you're pretty cool. Love when the TV show does that. Because you get to see that young people are inherently cool, or at least that's what they're described as in teen dramas. They're inherently cool and their parents are not. But when Sarah took out the fact that you're my mom, she actually saw what we all saw, is that Lana is a pretty cool person. Um, and I honestly wish we got to see more of their dynamic. I do think one of my biggest gripes with season three is that some of the dynamics were kind of messed up because people were being paired off in other storylines that they didn't need to be. Chrissy is an example of that because she got lumbered with the Kyle storyline, which the response has been a little bit lackluster towards, and
Mm-hmm.
understandably so. Chrissy has shared very little scenes with Lois during her cancer storyline. Since Sarah and Jordan are going back and forth, Sarah didn't get that many scenes with Lana. Lana was doing a lot of tiny mayoral stuff, so she wasn't interacting with a lot of people, which is why when she finally had the episode with Lois, it was wow, wow, where has this been all season? Wow. Um, but then when they started like teasing her and John Henry Irons getting together, which by the way, love that for Lana,
Mm-hmm.
love that for John. They deserve it. They deserve some happiness. But at the same time, since they got pocketed off into their own storyline together, they also weren't as present for other people's. And I don't think that's something Superman and Lois struggled with when it was at its strongest. So I do wish we kind of just I wish Lana was present more during Lois's storyline because she is such a supportive friend and that one episode was so powerful. Imagine what more scenes like that could have been like. But again, this is television, I do understand it. Um, but in the midst of all of that, there were some like absolute gold nuggets, like the Sarah and Lana moment, the Lana and Lois episode. Um, uh, One episode I really appreciated was the again not to drag Sarah again, but the episode where Sarah let her little sister go missing. It's again that sounded awful. I apologize. Um, Jonathan was the one that stood up to help find Sophie. He was the one that went and found her and then had that beautiful conversation about sometimes always being the kid that gets overlooked or left out. And because we know about Jonathan's story, about how he has to be the extraordinary normal person in a family of super people, um, that resonated so well. Um, Sophie's not a main character on the show. Bless that poor child. She probably deserves to be after all she's been put through as a recurring character. But you cared enough about the storyline to want to find her, which again is the strength of the writing there. You cared enough about the characters to want to root for them to find her, and you cared enough about how Jonathan felt when he did find her. That little moment between Jonathan and a character who's barely on screen said so much, and it just speaks to the strength of writing on the show. On that note, Michael Bishop's a new addition to the show was Jonathan. He slotted in instantly, felt like the same Jonathan, but also with his own little a unique take on it, the character. And it slotted into the world of Superman and Lois to perfection. Again, I do wish he got a little bit better treatment. Kyle was very mean to him a lot of the times, and he didn't deserve that. Um, but it made for some great storytelling on Jonathan's standpoint. My hope for the final season is that Jonathan really gets the spotlight because it feels like they've slowly been turning it onto him and then it's snatched away from him again. Um, but I will say, seeing what Michael Bishop did with Jonathan in season three really made me excited to see where his character goes in season four. Um, I love Jonathan, but I feel like my love for Jonathan could be magnified a little bit more if they gave him the love and attention he deserves in the show. So hopefully we'll get there in season four. But yeah, there was a lot of character dynamics in season three. I loved most of them. Some of them left me feeling a little cold. I'm just not really that invested in the Kyle and Chrissy relationship. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I did like the fact that Sarah stopped treating her disrespectfully and that the two of them kind of found an even keel, but then that storyline was dropped as well. Um, so lots of potential in some of the subplots of season three, but not all of it was always realized.
No, I think those were the when we were outside of the Clovis part of the season, it struggled. And unfortunately, but it's true. I think there's always been sort of an issue on Superman Lois when it comes to the teens.
Hmm.
It seems like we're getting somewhere, and then we know we do an about face. Like I love all four of them together. Or the episode where they go
Definitely.
to Metropolis to this house party, and then end up in I don't even know where they are, but they're like in a car just doing things.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the four of them. I love them as a quartet. I really wish that the show leaned in to the way that these kids are friends. Because there's just something about that feels good about their scenes when they kind of get to riff off each other and they get to
Hmm.
protect one another. Or in some cases, they get to go to do heist together, using like the suits. Because I think that was like is that this season? Natalie and Jordan and uh wow, the other twin. Please help me. You just said
Jonathan.
it. Jonathan, thank you. Like it just popped my brain just kept saying Jordan. Jordan. is like, that's not his name. I already said that. Jordan and Jonathan. That's the season, right? Where they season three, where they have to go get something together,
I
right?
believe so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Um, I'm pretty sure it is.
Uh,
Um,
but it's
you're right.
fun.
Yeah, you're right. That was
Yeah.
when the four of them are together, they feel like young people. And
Mhm.
sometimes the drama, I'm not going to say it's above them because obviously teen dramas have mature drama, but the drama weighs them down an awful lot and forgets to let them have fun. Um, we've all had different opinions over the teens. Some of Jordan's super stuff we've been conflicted over, but he's
I don't
still
like any of it.
he's still a he's still an engaging character. Um, Jonathan is really coming into his own. He feels like a real teenager, and we don't get enough of that. Natalie has been a wonderful addition to the show, and the actress who plays Sarah Inde is just such an authentic performer. I love watching her deliver her lines. So I want better for her to get together the four of them regret. I just wish that sometimes the writing team would be able to take that energy and apply it into their solo scenes. Like, don't
Yes.
get me wrong, there's some great ones. Jonathan and Natalie have a great dynamic. We saw in this season, particularly Jonathan and Sarah make great friends. I remember there was that rumor, oh, please don't put them together. Thankfully, they did not do that. Um, they have a great friendship. Um, Jordan and Natalie are starting to interact more as superheroes. Maybe we could develop that a little bit more. Um, and Natalie and Sarah are great friends as well. So there's a lot to work with there. Just sometimes it doesn't always make it to the screen.
No, and I wish they had made the choice to have the three, the trio, Natalie, Jordan, and Jonathan, be sibling-esque.
Hmm.
I thought that's where they were going to go after we got introduced to Natalie, and that's not what they did, which is actually my gripe with the series as a whole. I felt like not that our Lois needed to step into a mother role for Natalie when her Lois had passed, but that the relationship between them would be a bit more familial.
Yeah.
And it has moments where that happens, and then we pull all the way back. And I was like, no, it makes sense for her to want to kind of imprint on these two boys and Lois, and they just wouldn't let it happen. We do get that scene with the watch
Yeah.
where John Henry is absolutely not for it, and they didn't unpack it well. And that was the thing that was like, I know it's because he doesn't want to give a piece of his wife to this Lois, who's his friend, who is also dying.
Hmm.
And why aren't we talking about it like that? Why isn't because and I think it's because there just wasn't enough time. So then you get that scene where she does actually give the watch, and there's like this distance with John Henry, even though he is like, we're gonna be here for you. And I was like, if we had more room to breathe in that section, we probably would have gotten a really good scene between Natalie and John Henry where they discuss, more about the way John lost his Lois and how Natalie lost her Lois and how she needs him not to project his grief onto her when she is trying to be here for this woman who's become important to her and not just because she shares her mom's face.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I feel like the show itself is a mixture between cable and streaming quality television. But season three, towards the as it went on, started caving to network television tropes. And I'm a big fan of network television, but this to me is not a network TV show, even though it technically is. And it started caving to this character gets a subplot, and this character gets a subplot, and this character's paired off with this character. Or when someone's feeling a certain kind of way about something, they'll act out in the same way that a character on network TV would, so that by the end of the episode, you have to get to the heart of what's bothering them. But just like in any ensemble network TV show, there's never enough time to fully dive into it. And I think the John Henry example is a good one of that because he was acting up, he was being cold, he was being distant, and then he kind of revealed what he was feeling. But we never really got to dive into that. And then once the episode ended, the plot moved on. Whereas Superman and Lois was usually better at stretching its storylines out, giving the characters and actors more to work with. So I genuinely think I said this multiple times in my reviews of the season, and it did sound like I was a bit of a broken record trying to blindly defend a show. But I genuinely think that the lack of the loss of those 2 to 3 extra episodes hurt this season, um, because this is a show that start is always pitched as a 13 episode season, and then the first 2 seasons got 2 extra episodes ordered, so we had 15. Season 2 had 15 as well, did it? But season 1 definitely had 15. Season 2 might have had 15. Season 3 lost 2 or 3 of them. And I think that created some pacing issues. Because we started this season moving as beautifully slow as possible, diving into the storylines and the characters and everything. And then towards the end, as all the revelations started being made about Bruno, about Pia, um, some of the more important storylines like Lois's battle with cancer, it started to take more of a back seat. Some of the subplots started to take a back seat and we went all in on the super stuff. And then in the penultimate episode, we completely switched gears and Lex Luthor was introduced. And we ultimately found our way to Doomsday. And don't get me wrong, that created a phenomenal standalone season finale, but it felt like a very hard pivot considering this was the understandably slowest moving storyline we had so far. And then it was really taking a moment to show us the nuances of a storyline like that. And then somewhere along the way, I feel like we hit the fast forward button. Things started happening a lot quicker. Subplots were quickly dropped and then brought back in towards the end. And the main villain storyline was completely dropped and we pivoted from Bruno to Lex towards the end. I think if we had 2 or 3 more episodes, some of those back half of the season episodes would not have felt quite as rushed. We would have had more time for Lois's storyline rather than just seeding in a line of dialogue about how her doctors are positive about her diagnosis now. Um, so yeah, I do think some of the level of storytelling and the quality of it suffered towards the end of the season, and I genuinely don't think that's the show's fault. I just think that's because the CW did not order the 2 extra episodes that the previous 2 seasons had.
See, I do think it's their fault. Just a smidge. And I say that because there were things that they focused too much on that did to
Well, that too,
give
yeah.
other to try different things. So like you had mentioned earlier, we were kind of doing these like little subplots per episode that then either don't go anywhere or we circle back to the same point. Like I loved that John got to be a junior firefighter. Didn't
Yeah.
really move the needle. I Jordan and Sarah once again were arguing, didn't really move the needle. She has a connection with the previous mayor's son, and the mayor had passed. And so like you get that seated in, but it's also kind of used as a moment for Jordan to be jealous. Then we had to find a way to get Kyle to know about Superman. And it was so contrived. Like the idea that, we're arguing the car thing, the situation, she gets this car spins out and the lie is terrible. Like the lie. And so we're not like, it's just, yes, the boy just believes we just wound up on the sidewalk. Why couldn't we have said maybe Superman was came by?
Yeah.
Why did that have to be? So then in order to protect Jordan, we've now got to tell Kyle the truth. And then Kyle switches up in a way I did not expect, with him being like, oh, like differential, like what do you need, John? I mean, your father's doing good work. And I'm like, what's happening? Like, because you don't really like this man that much, and now we suddenly find out he's Superman. You're okay. He's like the best thing since sliced bread. All right.
Mhm.
um which I was like, I wish we had found a more organic way of letting Kyle know. uh there was something else. It had to do with, even though I really did enjoy Lana and Sarah's growth, if we could have cut some scenes, it would have been her slapping her daughter in the heat of the moment.
Mm,
That just wasn't emotionally. We could have gotten there where, because Sarah is very sensitive and easily upset anyway. But there could have been something else that Lana maybe said that caused her not to want to be in her mother's home. We didn't have to hit her like that. Just didn't, because it felt like one of the things that Superman Lois doesn't do is shock. And that felt like it was supposed to be a shocking moment. And granted, they didn't move on. We kept in the arc of that, but I did not like it as a
mhm.
choice. And we still didn't really get to unpack Lana's past. Like we got there a bit, but like there seemed to be an indication of she just did something that her mother would have done. And she
Yeah.
hates herself for it. But we don't know her mom and they don't talk about her mom a lot. So we could only kind of infer. Um, And then we have the sit down at the diner, which I think was worthy. That's definitely a worthy scene. I just wish it's not coming at after Lana having hit her child. And then there's this thing that they keep going back to with Sarah about her mental health that we
Hmm.
just never unpack entirely, that she just refuses to negotiate, but is a part of that moment in the diner. Like the fact that Kyle at the apartment has to tell her, you know, this is the woman who found you. She found you in the bathroom after your suicide attempt. And she was the one who kept you alive until the paramedics came. And Sarah's shamefaced when she hears that, but it doesn't really quite I feel like it doesn't quite land for her as a character, writing wise. Like if you're gonna bring us back to her suicide attempt and how that affected Lana, then we need to actually do it. We can't just have a few lines of dialogue and then we kind of move past it. It was an inflection point in that household, and Sarah wants to move on like it didn't happen, and that's just not gonna happen for her mom,
Hmm.
particularly because she's the one who found her. Uh I feel like they needed to explore Lana's feelings on what it's like to be a parent who feels like you failed your child because she tried to leave. She tried to kill herself. Like, what did I miss? And Lana's trying to like fix it and talk to her, and Sarah not being able to be there emotionally. I'm just like, I get it because she's a stubborn teenager. Like, that's literally what you've written about her, but I kind of wish you didn't write it that way. I would really
Hmm.
love to be able to unpack how Lana feels as a mom. It's not her fault. Those are Sarah's mental health issues that she needed to work through, but that doesn't mean that her mom wouldn't carry guilt.
Yeah, of course. And I do feel like there's elements of like real storytelling potential there and nuance with the relationship and never been better than in season one. Um, and maybe it's just because season two took the characters in a different direction. It felt odd to be back here in season three and only done on something of a surface layer storyline. We never really dived into it. And I just kind of criticize network TV and lovingly. But on network TV, when you bring up something, it's because it's going to be dealt with. Whereas Superman and Lois, it felt like occasionally brought up Sarah and Lana's past with her mother. It never fully explored it in the way you kind of expected. Um, so that kind of caught me off guard. I do feel like there were elements unsaid there that maybe needed to be said a little bit more. Um, a lot of potential for exploration in that storyline, and I don't think we're going to get it now since both of those characters are only going to be in 3 episodes each. Who knows if they'll even be the same three? I'm sure some of them will be the same ones, but um, I don't know. I know I've always struggled with Sarah because Sarah to me, maybe it's the way the actress portrays her, or maybe it's the strength of writing from her in season one. But Sarah is sounds like she would be a fascinating lead of a teen drama, and she sometimes gets lost in the storyline. So that sometimes when she acts out, it comes off as petty. Sometimes when she picks on someone's side, you're like, but you were on this person's side last week. It's like the well of potential with Sarah is there, but it never ever gets the chance to be fully explored in the way that it was in season one. So she comes off as quite, like I said, whiplash kind of character. Um, and those characters to me are fascinating, but I don't think the show can give her enough time to breathe, to really feel her the emotional stuff that she's going through, to unpack. Because they are trying to tell important storylines with her, but while the Lois storyline obviously had an incredibly long amount of time to breathe, and understandably so, Sarah's didn't get that chance, and as a result, it's hard to know where they were going for it, and if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because I feel like there's this, and we'll talk about it more in season when we get to our last season to talk about. But there's this through line of mental health in Superman and Lois. Like there's an interest there that doesn't isn't fully realized. Like it's
Mhm.
not, and I want it to be because if they went there, I think it'd be some really beautiful storytelling to talk about things like that. They just don't do it enough, like we get right up to the line and then we have to move on because that's not this show. And I was like, I get it, but like if you focus the person's arc on that, then we don't have to have 50 scenes of Jordan and Sarah arguing about this non-existent relationship that just needs to go away. Like be friends and be done because the rest of us are tired.
Yeah.
Um and or like in this case, in the other part of the season, Natalie's romance with Bruno's son, which paint by numbers, teen drama there.
Had to get them there to a certain point, and they pulled it off. But that's it. They pulled it off.
I didn't care about their romance. No, I did love the reveal though that he finds out about his mobster parents. That part, like things like you kind of want there to be like expedient or things that are off screen. Like maybe
Hmm.
all season you just saw Natalie giggling into her phone, until
Hmm.
finally like we meet this boy rather than having to see them kind of pseudo date. And so that they can rush us to one of the best scenes Superman and Lois has ever done. Not emotionally, just the way that it's filmed. That sequence in the restaurant when it becomes clear.
Oh my, intense.
The intensity of that. I was like, oh, we just switched to a crime drama. I'm loving it. And it really speaks to like the talent um on screen and behind the camera too for this show that they were able to do that we just turned because we're in Bruno's world. It suddenly became like we were watching an HBO drama and
Yeah.
you just stepped into the wrong restaurant. Like it was just it was chef's kiss, just like really and truly. But I think I'm at war, right? Because I love the ending of season three. I think it's spectacular. I feel like we could have shaved down Lux's penultimate episode because that man was
Mm,
walking on that deserted road for quite some time.
longest walk of my life.
I know. But I'm at war because I feel like there's a part of me that kind of maybe would have enjoyed this to be a slower season all about the families with superhero things in happening around it. But then you don't get that finale with the music was peak. We were rocking. And the change of Bizarro to Doomsday and how that happened. I think that was one of the smartest things I've ever seen writers do, where they're like, we have this one character, let's make him this other one. And how they did it was fantastic. I think at this point, Superman and Lois is my favorite objective superhero drama of all time. Subjectively, The Flash still has my heart entirely, but objectively, if we're talking about what's the best one that's ever been done, to me, it's Superman and Lois, and it's because choices like this
Yeah.
that they did.
I'm with you on the struggle totally because it feels like a different a finale for a very different season. But as a
Hmm.
standalone episode, it is incredible. Um, Yeah, the fight scene between Superman and Doomsday on the moon of all places, on the
Yes.
freaking moon. Um, with that 2000s like that, if there was a superhero movie, if there was a superhero movie in today's day and age, it would be triumphant, epic mu music over that scene. But if it was a superhero movie made in the early 2000s, it would have been like grungy, punky rock song on it, and that's the choice that Superman and Lois made, even though it's known for its triumphant score. Um. And yet it worked like a dream. My goodness, that shot at the end when the two of them were about to collide with the earth or the sun or something in the background. Um, it was just the stuff you would see all those panels in a comic book, and to see it reflected on the screen is just something it's so out of this world, seriously out of this world. And to think that they did this on a TV budget, that Doomsday looked
Right?
far more impressive than the one we saw on the big screen. Um, it was just absolutely incredible. The fact that Lex Luthor also he's a more violent and more vicious Lex Luthor than the one you come to know from the comics, and that made it really unnerving because Superman and Lois is a warm show by nature, so that made it really unnerving. And then the fact that he was able to produce this monster, and you genuinely felt for Superman's safety, of course, because Doomsday is the infamous villain that killed him in the death of Superman. So of course you were going to feel for his safety. But the fact that they ended the season then, and the show had yet to be renewed at that point, and you're like, oh no, oh no, um, it was just unearthly. It was
Yes.
amazing. Um, and it was an incredible end to the season. Definitely one of the best standalone episodes Superman at Lois has done. And even though I did want some more for the other storylines going on in the season, I do hope the fact that we had a cliffhanger means that some of them can be carried over into season four and get the proper culmination they deserve. But season three, excellent season for the most part. A couple of glitches and issues along the way, but it really reeled it back in for an absolute banger of a finale. not surprising considering the show we're talking about. And I do agree with you. Objectively, this might be the strongest superhero show that ever aired on network television, and one of the strongest superhero shows to air in general. And I think that finale was the perfect example of that. Chef's kiss.
Yes. That just like the amount of yelling again, like I said, I was doing. Because I just, people are trying to have a good night, and it's just me like trying to be silent, screaming, uh, watching the episode because they're so
Hmm.
like they really are. Fingers crossed, we're bringing that smartness to do the death of Superman, at least in the premiere, because that seems like what they're setting it up for. So
Hmm.
that's what I want. And because they could do it. They really could. I believe in them. I have no fear if they decide to do that storyline that they would do it with the nuance that it deserves. But we'd be here in season 3 all day. So I'm gonna move into because there's just so much there really is so much to unpack. It's one of the
Hmm.
one of the best crafted seasons of television. It just has little bumps on the road.
Sure.
Uh, but season 1, perfection, no. But somehow just truly a masterpiece.
Yeah. I mean, like, I remember the rumors leading up to Superman and Lois because that it started as a Supergirl spin-off. We were getting Tyler
Mhm.
and Betsy in their own roles, um, and we were excited to see how it would be, how what it would look like, because we hadn't had a new Arrowverse show since Batwoman. So what would the show? This show's been people have been wanting Tyler Hoechlin to lead a superhero Superman show for since 2016 when he first made his debut on Supergirl. And then when Bitsy showed up in 2018, they were like, we need these two together on a proper show, make it happen. And then shockingly, it did happen. I don't think anyone was expecting the cinematic levels that that first trailer was going to showcase. Um, it was only a 1 minute trailer, and it looked like we were watching the trailer for the next Superman movie.
Mhm.
Um, it was shot kind of like the Man of Steel movie in that there were dull colors in there. It had a more serious quality of tone to it. And there were more serious conversations rather than we need to stop the villain of the week. And I think at that moment we're like, oh, we could be dealing with a very different kind of show here. And then the pilot episode, 65 minutes of beauty. Um, that opening scene I teared up at. Uh, the learning about Clark's life, him narrating it, so with such fondness in his voice. Um, and then as soon as talking about Smallville and the importance it had, and then with a Smallville set that looked very like the one from the TV show Smallville. Um, and then we cut to his first shot of Superman, and it was of him wearing the iconic suit from the Fleischer cartoons. Um, putting the green car down in the exact same way that Superman did in his very first comic book appearance in DC Comics, the exact same vintage green car. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to love this. And the
Mhm.
music started. And then Tyler said that comment about, there you go, friend. And the child said to him, hey, look, cool costume. And he said, thanks, my mom made it for
The
me.
way he
And shot
says
off into the
it.
sky. He's so enthusiastic and endearing. And this just that is what Superman is, and this show captured it in 3 minutes, better than most movies do across 2 hours. And I was just like, this is going to be glorious. And the season that followed absolutely was.
It's just there's something it's always hard to introduce superheroes, um, particularly ones that are beloved and have many, 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 many iterations.
Mm.
Uh, but the way that I felt there's so much joy, like it just didn't feel like this was going to be a show where they're like, oh, we're making a Superman show. They're like, no, 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 no. This show's about Clark Kent. He just happens to be Superman. We're calling it Superman and Lois, but it's about Clark, and it's about his family, and it's about Lois, and it's about their kids. It's about the people in his life and the town that he loves. And I just like that's such a good decision to make because it means that you actually care about the man behind the cape.
Hmm.
And I think for some people, they don't. They might love Superman, but they love Superman. They're not necessarily Clark fans. And to me, you need to love both because he is both. And there's and I really appreciate that the writers and the team behind this show know that. There's a moment, it's not in the season, it's back in season 3, so I'm just going to mention it and move back into season 1. But the way that they are able to navigate Clark as a father and a husband while also being a superhero and keep his powers in check is something that I
Hmm.
adore. Whether it's played for laughs, like it was in season one, where that's when they're carrying the water. And he's just I mean, great bit of acting by Tyler Hoechlin, where we're supposed to pretend that he cannot carry this by him. It's like, oh, we're back. Like it's just, and the fact that Jordan finds it funny, um, is just sweet and it's cute. And then you have like the moment in season three where, when he shows up and he kind of uses his powers to get Candace's father in line, but it's clear that Superman is not going to this diner. Clark Kent is, and that
Hmm.
there's a clear delineation between Clark's understanding of himself as a person and his understanding of himself as a superhero. And I think we see that really shaped, obviously, in season one because they have to define it.
Hmm.
They have to show you that he is not someone who, these lives don't, they're in boxes for the most part, separate because his kids don't know until they do. But for him, in his mind, they're not separate. He's the same person, but you're gonna get a different person depending on the situation. And superhero is left for the superhero stuff, and Clark Kent takes over everything else. He's like, I'm 90% Clark, 10% Superman. And I think that the show balances that well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why this show is so unique compared to everything else. But I also think it understands Superman in a way that maybe not an awful lot of projects have before, because there is an awful misconception out there that Superman is a boring character. And I mean, on paper, I get it. He's perfect. He has the great hair, the toothy grin, the endless supply of superpowers, and he only has one weakness in kryptonite. Two, technically, if you count magic, but they're far and few between. Um, so I can see why someone would think, well, he's got no conflict. He's not that great. And Clark Kent's a nerd, and it's only a persona he puts on. So yes, Miss Lane. And that's it. There's not much more to him than that. On paper, if you didn't understand the character, I can see that, even though it's not true. Superman at Lois shows you why it's not true. Because Kal-El of Krypton and Clark Kent are two of the most interesting characters that have been portrayed on television in the last decade. We saw versions of that through Smallville, and now we're seeing a completely different end of his life in Superman at Lois. And I think the very first moment in the pilot episode, after he returns home after his super antics and just comes into the house, the triumphant music fades away. They're in that cool looking metropolis apartment, and he goes in and he sees Lois, who's on the phone to her editor, I think, and she like, dinner's in the oven. Apologize to Jordan, you missed therapy today. And just the whisper of it all, it was like, oh, this has gotten very cable drama very, very quickly. And then he has to go up to apologize to his son for missing the therapy session. And the son's just sitting there playing video games with his earphones in, and he thinks Clark Kent's so boring, like the average comic book reader who didn't understand the character might think it as well. It was just such a back down to earth moment, and you went from 100 as with his first introduction of Superman straight to zero, and the show then literally built us up back up to the super 100, because we got to see why Clark Kent was a 100 as well as Superman. We got to see why Clark Kent is such an interesting character. 5 minutes later in that episode, he's on the phone to his mom, who he then loses quickly after that. And then they move back to Smallville. And there's an awful lot of trauma there. But at the same time, Clark has to struggle being a superhero, with being a family man, with being a father, with being a husband, and with being Smallville's favorite resident, and the son of the beloved Martha Kent. He has to do all of that in the pilot episode, and it all comes across. And you get to see then the support he has in place from Lois. The the family dynamic is struggling at the beginning because Metropolis is not where they need to be, and they're still keeping secrets. And throughout the course of the first season, you get to see how that flourishes in a place like Smallville that Jordan or Jonathan did not want to be in for more than 5 minutes. And there's, I think I always say the Superman at Lois is not a superhero show. It's a family drama that has superhero elements in it. It's not like The Flash. It's not like Supergirl. It's more in the elements of the likes of Friday Night Lights or Parenthood. But it just
Mhm.
so happens to be about superheroes at the same time. And they have neighbors and they have friends and they've loved ones and everyone they're fighting for at the same time. You have this community, but at the same time, you have Superman lacing up his boots and putting on his cape to go off and fight aliens just in the afternoon before he comes home for dinner. Um, I think it's one of the most unique interpretations and yet one of the most authentic interpretations of the Superman lore. It's shocking to me that it wasn't done in that early 2000s burst of family dramas. Of course, we had Smallville then because that was during the burst of teen dramas, but it's shocking to me that it took to 2021 for it to actually air on TV because it feels like such an incredible opportunity for a movie or for a show to have explored. It's shocking that it hasn't been done by now, but my goodness, was Superman and Lois's first season worth the wait?
Yes, and I do think it took a team of people who actually care about shaping a show around Clark and his life. That his life, his day to day isn't sort of an addendum to
Hmm.
him being this super powerful being who is saving the world. Yes, there's something valid about, wanting to focus on that, but it's not as exciting to me. Like I
Yeah,
think it's is more exciting to see him navigate his relationships, and to always have it to carry the burden of the secret of his powers and what that can do to your relationships, even when you're protecting somebody. Then season one navigates that well. As in you'd mentioned the trauma of growing up, not only, in a small town where everyone knows each other, but in a small town where everybody knows each other and no one gets to know you.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
like that's like hard. And that, so I like the juxtaposition of that, we learn about him as a teen. And then, throughout the season, the juxtaposition of him as a teen versus his kids as teenagers. I don't really think it lands. I think there's more nuance in Clark as a teenager than his teenagers. But it's lovely to be able to see the arc of who he is as a person, the breadth of it. Because it's important. This is a Clark who's in his 40s. We're not, with Clark as he's discovering his powers for the first time, or
Hmm.
with Clark who is coming into Superman on his own. Though we do get that in one of the best episodes ever to air for Superman and Lois, episode 11. But it's not an origin story. This is a settled man. He's settled in his marriage, he's settled as a father, but he's not settled in, which is the crux of the complexity, is being back in the town he grew up in. And like that's a lot of the drama, dealing with people, who know you as this one thing that you no longer are. Like Kyle meets him in the conversation, like they're still 18.
Yeah.
And it's like, sir, it's been like 22 years. He's not the same kid that you used to bully, and it's not funny to joke about that either. But the to be that, but that's so real, right? To be like where I'm back in this space where everyone kind of still sees me as the Kent boy. Like I'm Martha Kent's son, which there's a lot of pride in that, but it's also something he has to, carry and navigate. Like you can't she was the pillar of the town, which didn't he say in season two that now that's Lana?
Yeah, yes. She's kind of
And
taken on that role, yeah.
yeah, which again, beautiful. That he
Deserved.
can recognize that as well. But I think that's what makes this season so different from the other seasons that we've seen for superhero dramas, because it's not an origin story or because it's not about his powers. It's about him. I will say though, my problem, I'm glad I continued pushing through to focus on the Kents, because my problem with the start of the season is the writing around John Henry,
Mm.
which which we all think is Lex at first, because
Yeah.
of the
Remember the Captain
suit.
Luther?
Yes, but and it is because you have to be really careful in shows with predominantly white casts when your antagonists are Black. Like, and there's no other representation, because it can come off not well, right? I was having issues with that. I was like, what is his issue? Because I would like to know, because right now it's a little mustache twirly, and I would like to know what the problem is, particularly as the only other dark skinned person on the show, man, really, well, not man, but the teen boy who's also a bully. And I was like, I'm gonna need
Mm.
you to, there needs to be other representations of Black men, particularly dark skinned men on this show if you're gonna do that. Because it doesn't translate well. It creates this narrative that is often seen in television, that they're the being more aggressive, being quick to anger, and that's not representation we need to see on screen, particularly if it's not nuanced. But then the world opens up, and it gets better, and we push that bully all the way to the side because he's not important. But John is, and I really did like the exploration of what it means to be a widower, particularly in the way that he's a widower, and to not be able to healthily navigate the fact that you are in a different world and this man is not the Superman that terrorized the world that you're from.
Hmm.
Uh, I thought that was such an interesting story to explore once we got there. Like
Yeah.
once we got there, because I think he angered me, it was bothersome because I was like, that's not our Clark is not your Clark, but I understand the trauma around being like, but he could be though. Who's to say that
Mm.
the Clark that I know wasn't like this Clark? And then to have to also deal with the fact that the woman who shares your wife's face is married to the man who killed her in your world. We need therapy immediately. It's just it was so tough, but so interesting to watch.
Definitely. And I agree. I feel like some of the portrayal of John Henry at the beginning is a little slow getting off the ground because you're right, for those first couple of episodes, you were left to think that is this Lex Luthor? Is this an alternate version of Lex Luthor? And they constantly portrayed him in a villainous, like you said, mustache twirling kind of way. But when they landed the plane, they got there, but
Hmm.
they took their time with it. The scene where he revealed that he was actually the DC hero Steel, I was like, oh my goodness, I was not expecting that. Like that scene when he lifts the hammer, it was like, I am Steel or whatever it is he says. I was like, oh, I really, really like you. But you're right, it took a little while to get there. And the reveal then that there was a John Henry on this world that had died by Bruno Mannheim, which ultimately came into context later on. Um, and that he was from another Earth, and that it was to incorporate in the idea of the multiverse. It was all very compelling, but I know what you mean. We're obviously supposed to root for Clark. This man is coming in trying to kill our beloved hero who's never done a bad thing in his life. And I was like, leave our guy alone. Um, but by the end of the season, you understood where he was coming from. You rooted for him and his story with Lois. You rooted for him, and you wanted Natalie to be alive, even though the story went out of its way to make you think that she wasn't. Um, and I do think we haven't seen an awful lot of portrayals of Steel now over the years, but this is by far the best portrayal of the character of Steel we've ever seen. I think the only other thing we have to go on is the 1997 Shaquille O'Neal led movie that the three of us will be watching at some point. Um,
Mhm.
but so this is obviously more nuanced than that. And I think it's a it's a great portrayal that really made me fall in love with the character, even if it took its while. When I didn't know he was Steel, I was indifferent to him as a character. When I found out who he was and what was driving him, I was like, I suddenly am number one in the John Henry Irons fan club. Love this man so much. I don't like that we're going to see less of him and Natalie in season 4 because their family dynamic became such a staple of the show. It was so lovely, so powerful, and they're such a great double act. They really are. Um, the fact that we went from having no scenes of them together in season 1 to them suddenly becoming basically like furniture in the show, like a huge part of it from season 2 onwards. I was like, there's none of the original characters in the show, and I'm totally invested in the scene. I love learning more about the Ironses. I wish we got to spend more time with them in season 3, but I do, or season 4. But I do hope that generally we will have more of the just more of those scenes, more of them as characters, and because like you said, that scene is the season 2 finale where they were just them in the spacesuits. Like they might not even have been in the same scene together, the actors, because it was just the close-ups of their two face, and the level of performance and storytelling in that scene was just out of this world. So I love the Irons. I do agree they were a little bit shaky coming into the show, but once we got there, we really got there. Um, some of season 1 has aged a little poorly in hindsight, like that relationship with that girl that Jonathan had, and then she suddenly disappeared after that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I not necessarily necessary. Some of the teen drama feels like it's done for the sake of it, instead of actually offering something of importance towards the plot. I like teen drama. I said it. I'm not saying that as like a dude bro that just loves superheroes and doesn't like teen dramas. Some of my favorite TV shows are teen dramas. I love CW teen drama, but some of the stuff in Superman and Lois often feels like it doesn't go anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
um, when it could really contribute to the plot. Um, but like I did enjoy. I think one of my favorite things about the show was seeing the pivot from that mature, authentic adult drama to the teen drama because you were invested in Jordan and Jonathan's storyline. Sarah in season 1 was one of my favorite characters. I loved what they did with her. She was such a grounded and authentic character. and you understood her conflict. I could have watched a show being led by just her, which is why I wish the show had done more with her after season one. But I really did get invested in the Sarah and Jordan relationship. Um, I thought I liked the fact that they were almost these two outsiders. Sh Everyone in Smallville kind of felt like they'd been conditioned to the small town way of life. Sarah didn't, and she was struggling with that, which is why her and Jordan became a beacon of hope for each other. Which is, I wasn't necessarily like shipping them to get together, but I really enjoyed their scenes as being that anchor that the other would need at, which is why it really bothers me that we lost that after season one. Um, but we could pivot from the Superman, Lois Lane, and what do you call him, Morgan Edge slash Talrow storyline right into Sarah and Jordan's storyline. And I was in it hook, line, and sinker. I also thought they brought it together all really well in the end because we were going from adult stories to teen stories and it didn't feel like they were connected. But in the end, they all came together. They all had a role to play. And I know that was due to the discovery that Talrow was actually Superman's brother. Again, everything about Superman and Lois was all about family. It all came down to family. And I thought just as a coherent season, for the most part, it really landed the plane.
I think it did too, as a to have a full story arc that is, partly about the family coming to Smallville and navigating that space, and then partly about the superhero stuff, and
Yeah.
Taro and Clark, even learning something about himself that he hadn't known before. Which again, great. Always learning something new about yourself. Finding out, you had a brother, a bit rough at
Mhm.
40, but like
Yeah.
really, really good to be able to, have that different perspective, to for someone who he doesn't remember Krypton at all. He wouldn't. But like the loss that Taro feels, and then the bitterness regarding, I don't remember if they unpacked it in the season or in season two, but the bitterness is when it came to his their mother's decisions.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, weighty, good, meaty. Like we can still be, fun and flirty with Lois, but we can also be like, really delving through the family drama. For Jordan and Sarah, I like them because it was two kids who have had struggles with their mental health, who get to speak to someone who gets it, who
Right.
understands. Because there's this in the montage sequence for the premiere. You also learn about Jordan's struggles, about
Sure.
the how the twins are different. And I remember feeling gobsmacked that we even did that in a superhero drama, that we had discussed that it's not just that the boys have different personalities, it's that Jordan is just inherently more sensitive to the world and they don't know why. Like and they've been trying to help him. He just feels like a burden because John is healthy and he feels like his brother is the son that Clark wanted and he's not. Like he feels like he's the broken one. I'm like, baby, that's not true. He loves you both equally. You just have a stronger a tougher time navigating the world and that is okay. Like that is what getting the help is for. And I liked that they did that. I kind of wish, in the further seasons they had explored that more, particularly with Jonathan's not necessarily jealousy, but no longer being the one that's most like his dad.
Hmm.
What that loss is like for him. Like, no, Clark was not, sportsing it up. He's not the athlete, but like John came off as being the one that was the most okay. And now, Jordan has this connection with their dad that he doesn't. And what that must be like to navigate that. I don't know. Those are the spaces that I wish they had dug into more. But I love the contrast between the twins and how they set that up and how it is personality, but it also has to do with their mental health and the way that they call back to it a lot. Like Jonathan is such a protector of Jordan and it's not necessary for him to have powers to be his brother's protector. And they show that so well in season one and the callback they have in season three when Jordan is panicking in the hospital because of Lois's surgery, where you get to hear about how he used to be the one to calm his brother down. I was like, the way that they just see things in like this that like break your heart and then seal it back together is just beautiful. And that moment reminded me of season one.
Yeah.
It reminded me that they had already established that dynamic and established it well. Like, even though John is a golden boy, or was, we season two problematizes that really hard. Like, but he was the golden boy. That does not mean that he in any way feels that his brother is inferior or
Hmm.
shouldn't be protected or there's any resentment there. I mean, they have their dust ups and some of that stuff does come out, but that's normal.
Hmm. And I think that's the beauty of the relationship is that I love what Superman and Lois does with family stuff. You're right. That's I forgot about that scene in season three. That was an incredible moment. And it really did call back. Wasn't it the season one finale when Jordan was mentally attacked by Tal Rho's father, Zeta Rho, um, uh, who overtook his mind and body, because he saw Jordan as the weaker of the two. Of course, Jonathan didn't have any powers, but Jonathan, as far as what Zeta Rho would have thought, would have had a stronger mind. But since
Mhm.
Jordan had the powers, Zeta Rho saw him as an easy one to attack because Jordan struggled with the world, like you said. So we thought that made him weak. He very quickly found out that did not make him weak. When Lois decided to go into Jordan's mind to find him in there and get him out so that he could take control again, Jordan's or Zeta Rho woke up. He went to attack Jonathan. Jonathan tried to stop him, and there's a beautiful scene where I think Zeta Rho slash Jordan has Jonathan by the throat, and like Jonathan is like tearfully saying he'll always be his brother and that he's always there to support him. And right then, Lois wakes up and Jordan wakes up, and just the fact that they all have that moment together as a family. Yes, Lois was the one that brought him back out or that opened the door for him, but Jonathan was already there pleading for him, having him flash full of memories of their bond together. And these two can act incredibly immature when they want to. Remember how Jordan didn't like that Jonathan was texting Sarah, or when Jordan was struggling with the hearing issues of he was his superheroine was coming into effect, and Jonathan would purposely punch the wall so that it would radiate in Jordan's ear. So immature when they want to be, but yet at the same time you have these like absolute golden moments. You see the strength of the relationship, and I guess you could say the same thing about the other relationships in the show. Like obviously Jonathan is struggling, but also Lois is struggling, and she has those moments with her therapist discussing her miscarriage, um, and how she fears losing her boys for anything going wrong. And that was the episode that Jonathan got himself locked in John Henry's trailer, and he very nearly died if it wasn't for Superman coming to save him. Um, and then him and Lois had that beautiful moment where they broke down, and she was like, "You and me are the normal people in a family of super people, or the extraordinary normal people in a family of super people." Um, and it went to highlight the beauty of the show because when the show started, you thought, well, Lois is very in tune with Jordan's emotions, so they have a bond. And Clark, like the perception the show was putting on was that Jonathan was the potentially super son that Clark would have wanted, so they got along very well. But as the season progressed, the dynamic shifted. Lois was there for Jonathan because he was struggling with being normal, and Clark was there for Jordan because he was struggling with being super. Um, and I just think that's the show turned the dynamics you expected on its head, but it did so in an incredibly authentic way. There are some beautiful moments when Jordan's learning his powers, like the scene when he starts flying in the outside the fortress, and him and Clark just sit there and like open mouthed look at each other and then start jumping up and down for joy. Um, Such scenes that don't mean anything in the wider story as far as the villains go, and yet mean everything in the wider story as far as the families go. I think that's the beauty of Superman and Lois. I could watch a show like that that never has one Clark putting on the Superman suit, and I would come away with it feeling incredibly fulfilled. That's not what I came to Superman and Lois for the superheroics. I stayed for the family drama. I stayed for the heart. I stayed for the emotion, and I stayed for the performances. And I think all of that comes across in season one.
I think it does. I think that's one of the reasons why, when anyone really does rankings, a lot of times season one is at the top. And it's because it's the first time that you've fallen in love with the show, but also because it's the establishing of a show's identity goes a long way in deciding the writers deciding how they want to bring it forward. And if you have a good season one base, fingers crossed, that means that you'll be able to do bigger and better things. And I think, you know, they did do that with the rest of the seasons. They became more ambitious, but it's important that season one isn't for this series isn't that ambitious, in terms of like the types of stories they wanted to do. Well, no, 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 actually, I take that back. It is ambitious, but it's ambitious in the sense that it's not ambitious in the superhero lane.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's ambitious. It is really tough to sell people on a family drama involving superheroes because they want the flashbacks, the bam smack pow of it all. And the show gives it to you, but it makes you wait. You know, it may
Hmm.
like it's because it's not it's cool and it's fun. But particularly in season one, they're just like, oh, that's great, oh, that's wonderful. But here's what we care about. We care about the Kens. We care about
Hmm.
introducing you to the Cushings. We care about you understanding Smallville. We care about the Lanes, even though that relationship is very tense. And actually it gets better as the series goes on, but we start out a little rough. But and I think that is important.
Hmm.
I think it's important to establish that. I think that's why we all love it so much. That is that they were able to combine two disparate genres, superhero drama and family drama, and make them work really, really well. I know for some people it doesn't because they prefer to be with just Clark and Lois. But for us, it really does.
It really does. And it does come across, like it came across right from the beginning. But like if you did want a more I know we spoke a lot about what Superman and Lois does different, but the one thing that also spoke out to me, stuck out to me and spoke volumes for season one was how it does traditional Superman so well as well. Superman is a character full of triumph. Superman is a character full of heart, hope, inspiration. And we have this notion in a modern era that all superhero stuff has to be broody and moody and dark. Um, Superman and Lois went back to basics with superheroes. It was triumphant, it was heartfelt, and it was golden as far as superheroes
Mhm.
goes. It was all of what we love about. I said the praise Stargirl for the same reasons. It has that golden age of superhero DC Comics feel about it. A nostalgia, even though it's set in the present day, it feels like you're watching the old times play out. It's so uplifting and it makes time for moodier and serious storytelling without having it overwhelm the plot. It all feels so authentic. This is not the grim world of the DCEU we're talking about here.
Mm-mm.
It's it's classic superhero meets modern family storytelling dynamics, and the marriage there is just wonderful. And you won't get a better example of Superman than the show, yeah, but episode 11, a brief reminiscence in between cataclysmic events. First of all, incredible title, but that flashback episode, traditional Superman through and through. He was it was them, Clark and Lois, before the weight of their current storylines weighed down on them. And you got to see the traditional Superman. You got to see the traditional Lois Lane. And they did that on 40 minutes of television, better than some movies have ever done it. And that's why Superman and Lois Lane always work better on television for me. We've had some successful Superman movies, but since with the exception of the first Christopher Reeve movie, I think some of his best adaptations have always come from TV because you have more time to tell the story, you have more time to showcase why he's more than just truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Yes, that very much informs who he is, but you now know what he's fighting for in shows like Superman and Lois. Even Lois and Clark from the 90s, which highlighted his love for Lois. Smallville highlighted his love for his family. This does both, and it does it so well. And you get a beautiful balance, always a throwback to one of those nice little traditionally Superman episodes of what the show could have been like had it been set 20 years. But then the rest of the season shows you why it needs to be set now, why we chose to tell this story, and why it's important to a modern generation. There is no better Superman at Lois Lane story than Superman at Lois. And I don't think I'm ever going to change my mind on that.
No, there isn't a better one. I think that the fact that they were able to tell their love story in 40 minutes though, like and
Right.
and have you believe it. And obviously a lot of that comes from having known them for the first 10 episodes. So you get to see it. Plus, if you were paying attention to them when they were in the Arrowverse, you also see it. But to see how much of a puppy Clark is and so eager to learn, and a little bit naive. And then you have Lois, who is commanding, but also incredibly endeared to this man, and the way that their relationship just works. She just shines like the sun, and he is there. just ready to soak it up. Like
Yeah.
he's just like he really is. And then to see her and the fact that, and I think they did this beautifully where, she does get her sit down with Superman. And if you thought that she just cares about him because he's Superman, you're wrong. The fact that she's kind of giggling with the is that an EP? I don't really know what the woman's
I
job is
think
for
she
the
went for Lois's time at the Daily Planet because she has
yeah.
popped up a few times since. But yes, I think that was her role.
Oh, okay, where they're just like she's like, I mean, yeah, I see him, but I mean Clark though. I think I think I love him, and I'm just and him getting to hear it. It's just nice to know. I know from his perspective that it's about him. Like the
Hmm.
Superman part, that's a part of who you are, but I love you. I love that aspect of the relationship. I also like that in the episode you get the classic Superman villain who's a Nazi. They're
Yeah,
paying an homage to that because that is really, one of the it's like a lesser known stories now, I guess, because they don't really delve deep into why Superman was started. But the two creators are both Jewish, correct?
I believe so.
I think they are. So it makes sense that in the episode where we're harkening back to the previous times, that's the villain that they chose. As he's in the classic suit, as he's falling in love for the first time, as it's also kind of I love that it's like a modern take on the 40s. Because there's
Right.
something about the way that they design, like Lois is clearly in modern outfits and so is Clark, but it's the way that they color it, and it's the way that the objects around them kind of give that feel, even though it's supposed to be modern. That I really enjoy that balance. Like it's that the set production was great. The
It was.
costuming was great. They really did a good job of giving us that back in my day feels for them since we are going back in the past, while also, having you. It's just a great addition to the story. I'm rambling a little bit because I don't really know how to talk about how much I love this episode.
It's
Uh,
so good.
it's so good, but I think it's also because Superman and Lois has this thing where they're able to marry the writing, the set design, the costume design, the acting into the full package. And that's exactly what you want from television. It's actually why I love television more than film. Um,
Same.
I enjoy movies. You will not catch me doing movie marathons because there's just something about being able to tell a story in a longer form than 90 minutes or 2 hours that I enjoy more because it allows everybody to play more. It allows you to be among different sets, different casts of characters, different dynamics, and to even in this case flash back and still change the script in a way that works. And that's lovely and that's enjoyable and it makes it one of the best episodes of television ever. WandaVision did a really good job of that too.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Nostalgia and superheroes go hand in hand because of the eras where most superheroes were created in. Um, and you're right about that episode of Superman and Lois because the fact that they managed to find a way to incorporate that classic suit again because hitting us over in the face with it in the first opening scene of the series ever was a moment, but it was too good a suit to let to go to waste. So the fact that we got to let Clark wear it for a whole episode when we flash back to his at the beginning of his time as Superman, it was just amazing. Um, the Superman at Lois thrives on nostalgia, but that episode showed us why it was so important to the show, why it's so important to Superman as a character. Um, and you're right, there's something very like period and dated about that episode and the show in general. I think it wears it very, very well. Um, but I mean, that's who Superman is. There's an uplifting feeling about Superman storylines ever since the 40s when people were reading them in the comics or 1938 when he made his debut. Um, and we're actually recording this, I believe, on the day where Superman first made his comic book appearance, April 18th.
Wow, really
So
awesome.
that's pretty apt. So just that image of, even though the Fleischer suit did not debut in the comics, I believe it debuted in the 40 serials, animated serials. Um, the fact that we were able to merge that with that shot of him lifting the car from the comics with the classic villain. I don't know why his name's escaping me. I said it multiple times. Um, But with the classic villain, the fact we were able to then show the beginnings of his relationship with Lois, his time at the Daily Planet, and all fit it into just 40 minutes before he went back to seeing the more worn down, deeper, layered versions of these characters. Superman and Lois is the perfect example of having your cake and eating it. It's managed to tick all the boxes in all the right ways. Um, and I couldn't ask for better from a Superman adaptation.
No, not at all. And that's why season 4 has a lot to live up to,
Yeah.
especially because it's the final season. And I really hope that not circle back, but that we come full circle. From I feel like, as much as we've waxed poetically about the seasons in season 1, that we feel the same way about season 4.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
I,
We'll
I,
take
I
this
really want.
we'll take this episode down and stick in their season 4 ranking and then put it back up when the time comes.
Yes, I did, and to watch this back too, to be like,
Where
like
would we put
where would
it?
we put it? I would love to be able to put it at the top.
That'd be awesome.
That's really hard for final seasons though. And I mean it's written already, so it's not like I can manifest anything. But what I would say though that there's something about the way that all of the seasons have come together that I feel comfortable about what season 4 is going to offer. Even if it's not my favorite season, I don't think it's going to be my least favorite in terms of how a plane is landed. I think they're going to do really well. I'm scared about these 10 episodes just because 10 episodes is really tight.
Hmm.
But if we're doing one, if we're going to emulate season 1 or we do one storyline all the way through, it should be really good.
Yeah. I have faith with this writing team. I know some issues kind of caught up towards the end of season 3, but there's no outside realm here to like tell stories in the future. We know we have to have everything told by the end of the season, and this writing team has done a wonderful job of bringing the show's storylines full circle. The final episode of each of the seasons have been outstanding, and more often than not, the storylines leading up to them have been as well. The lowest Superman at Lois can go is still a heck of a lot higher than a lot of the other shows we've talked about in this podcast. So I do have faith in that end. There is a show we've talked about a lot that completely missed the boat with its final season, completely misunderstood the assignment, and left its fans feeling a very sour taste in their mouths. I don't think Superman and Lois will do that. It's not exactly known for meandering. Occasionally it happens, but it's not exactly known for ignoring the most important parts of the show. It always finds a way to incorporate them. We know the family, the Kent Lane dynamic, family dynamic is the most important part of the show. I have no doubt that will get the focus. We're finally going to see Superman and Lex Luthor have that big dramatic battle we've been waiting for. We don't know how Doomsday is going to wind up, and we don't know how certain characters are going to have their final storylines because they're only going to be in some episodes, not all of them. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes together. But from what we know about the show and that we've been nearly spent 2 hours talking about, the show knows how to deliver. I have faith that they'll do it one more time.
Yes. Yes. Okay, that's the thing that will manifest, that they'll do it
Yeah.
one more time and I think they will. Hate waiting till the fall. But but at least in 6 months, most likely, because for those who don't know, CW usually launches its fall TV schedule in October, not September with the other networks, unless they decide to switch it up for us.
Who
We will
knows?
not, they might, but we won't see the earliest we'll see Superman and Lois is October, most likely. I'm not even gonna attempt thinking about November because how dare. But
We don't need that.
we do not need that. But you guys, thank you for watching and let us know how you would rank the Superman and Lois seasons. We'd love to hear from you. But thank you. We're the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Michael.
Bye, y'all.